Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 62. I'm recording it on Monday, January 18th, 2021 at 6:55 p.m. Eastern Time. And I was just reminded of why I'm doing this series. I attended a presentation on basically racism in the South. And and a comment I made was basically that, like, you know, I get involved in issues. I learn about them and I try to work on solving them. And so I read a lot of books. And one of the frustrating parts of that is, first, it's painful. Read about animal abuse, for example, in factory farms. That's horrific. But the problem is that invariably authors will devote, let's say, 90% of their work, of what they're presenting, to the problem in ways that are really painful. Really, they get me angry, they get me sad, frustrated. But the problem with that is that they devote just 10% to the solution, if that. And that's a serious problem. You know, it's not enough to get people angry about whatever it is, to get people upset, to get people scared. If you're not providing solutions, you're creating perhaps a greater problem, because, like, the world has so much pain as it is. People in people's personal lives with the COVID. So you get people angry, you get people afraid, you get people frustrated, and without an outlet, it just, again, answers is where things need to happen, what needs to be described and explained. And again, regardless of the issue, very few people who present on social issues, on these issues, will focus on solutions. And that's why, with I the series before this, it was called, Cellular Agriculture for Pandemic-Free Future. Basically, it's the idea that, like, if we want to avoid future pandemics, which are inevitable, it's not a matter of if, but when, we absolutely have to end factory farming, because these are the breeding grounds for the pandemics. And so why am I doing this series on God? Because, like, after 60 episodes, after sending, thousands of emails to media outlets about this, um, whether it's climate change, whether it's pandemics, whether it's racism, whether, whatever it is, the inequalities, I don't, I've lost faith in people. I've lost faith in people's ability to understand, you know, the need for solutions. And the media, the media will do this. The media will present, there's a riot someplace, or some violence, whatever, some crime, whatever it is. And rarely do they get into the systemic problem, the systemic origins of the problem. So yeah, so, like, and for me, climate change trumps everything, really. I mean, like, yes, racism is a problem, animal rights is a problem. It's probably the most horrific problem on the planet, in the history of the planet, the way we treat animals. We have a lot of problems. Climate change is probably the most. And like, again, the way we're going, with our mindset of, yeah, let's talk about the problem some more. Maybe if we get angry enough, if we get afraid enough, maybe we'll do something. You know, um, that I'm doing this series because I've lost confidence and faith in people's ability to understand what we need to do and how we need to do it. So, and so it kind of, like, makes sense. I mean, part of and that's the origin of the series. That's why I decided to do the series, because, like, after 60 episodes of this series on I wouldn't see much coverage in the news, especially in the mainstream news. So yes, so the problems of this planet, of humanity, of the future, are problems that we, because of our leaders, perhaps, because they're not all that bright and they don't care all that much, really, and that's what I believe. The problems of humanity are not problems that we're capable of solving, apparently. That's the conclusion I reached. So, so, it's a Hail Mary pass. It's like, fine. Part of the premise of this series is that, and here's the thing. So like, whether it's somebody writing a book on, climate change, racism, violence, whatever it is, whatever the injustice is, inequality, um, oppression, just so many problems we have. Um, the problem is that, all right, the reason I don't get angry at these people is because, like, from my perspective, and I do sometimes get angry with them because because it's not up to me either. If I had a free will, if it was up to me, no, I wouldn't get angry with anyone about anything. That's really the sane, rational perspective, especially with these global things that aren't quote unquote personal. But you have to understand, I mean, like, and this is like, this is part of this series, like, people treating other people badly, we collectively, pretty much ignoring the our kids, our grandkids, relative to climate change. But like, their future is so bleak, so like, we could blame everyone, pretty much, especially our leaders of the rich, because they're the ones who are most in control. But the reason I would advocate to not do that is, well, one, politically, is like, you make enemies like that, you blame them, people can't accept that blame. We have this like psychological need to like ourselves and like, those around us, our family or friends and all. So when we're indicting people for ruining the planet, the climate, for future generations, they can't listen, they can't hear that. It's too strong an indictment. So, that's one part. But the other part, and I think it's more, it's a deeper, more fundamental part, is that, this is all God. You know, this is like, and I've gone through episodes. This is episode number 62. I'll go over this over and over. Basically, God created this reality. God is this reality. God created this reality from God. If people are mistreating each other, it's because we're being compelled to mistreat each other by God. And yeah, there's some problems that it's useful, it's beneficial, it's pragmatically effective to call on ourselves and each other to fix. Um, Transportation, we build highways, we build roads, schools, we build, schools, we educate our kids and all. Yes, there's some things that are within our range of abilities to be able to succeed at and then do well at. But these major problems, you know, major inequality, global poverty, about 1 billion people who suffer extreme poverty that kills their children under age of 5 at a rate of 10,000, 20,000 a day. Imagine, like, we're complaining about COVID, killing 500,000 people when it's all done, perhaps in April or whatever. 500,000. I mean, do the math. Like, uh, about 10 million people die of extreme, poverty every year, and this has been going on for decades, and we like to consider ourselves good. We're good to our family, our friends, people around us. It's kind of like a social contract. We're good to them, they're good to us. It's mutually beneficial. But have somebody like live in Africa or South America or Asia. We just like, we we don't have the capacity. And again, I don't blame us, but this is one reason for this series. Um, part of my challenge, and I'm not sure I do so well at this sometimes, is to shift from trying to explain things to you, to use this platform, this half an hour, 5 times a week, to hopefully talk to God directly, and ask God, what are you doing? You create a world. You create a world with sentient beings, like human beings, that we suffer. We feel not just our pain, we feel the pain of others. And you have us at each other, you have us aggressed against each other, competing for limited resources, sometimes even competing for resources that aren't limited, where you make us, like, compete with each other for superiority, for the bragging rights, for power over people. These really stupid things that are like, if it were up to us, I don't think we'd be this way. And so it's God is God is the reason our world is not the way it could be and should be. And perhaps, this is an open question in terms of, like, well, how do you get God to change? How do you get God to understand? I mean, God presumably knows everything. I mean, as a matter of fact, it's more than that. Like, and this gets so surreal because, like, basically, the idea that God is everything, God created everything, hence God is everything, hence God controls everything. And we understand this through the laws of nature. Nobody will deny that the laws of nature govern everything, our physical reality. Well, God is the laws of nature. Einstein understood this. It's called pantheism. God and the universe are synonymous. They're the same thing. So, so maybe, we have to speculate, because, like, again, like, asking ourselves and each other to solve these problems, to solve racism, climate change, animal abuse, global poverty, um, it's not working, or it's not working nearly well enough, nearly quickly enough. We're going into a downward spiral. These white supremacists, they're a symptom of this, this dysfunctional, well, American, you know, um, system. I mean, we've created a lot of inequality. We've put power, in people like Mark Zuckerberg's hands, and these billionaires, that they can do whatever they want. They have so much reach. And if they're having a good day, fine, people might do well. If they're not, well, it's up to them. And we've created these a feudalism. It's a new corporate feudalism, where these are our kings and queens, and they're determining what happens for everyone. We've lost our democracy to a great extent. So that's, and all right, I'm doing the same thing that I criticize, these writers of books on social issues, and issues of concern. Yeah, I'm presenting the problem, but this isn't, there's a bit of a difference, because, like, I'm presenting a problem that isn't out there. In other words, people don't realize that, that our solving our problems is not working. And people, this is like, it's not like climate change, where people have known this since the 80s, or racism since, like, people have known this since before the Civil War. This is something like the idea that we don't have the ability as human beings to solve these problems, so we have to rely on God, we have to call on God, is something not too many people are saying. So, I'll excuse myself, on that. But all right, so, like, let's try to, we've got about 14 minutes left, a lot of time. So it may be, and again, I can only speculate. This is all, we're in uncharted territory in terms of how do you get God to change? Now, like, in religion, we're taught that the prayer is efficacious. Prayer moves God, and people have had, I've experienced this. I ask God for, I feel pain, I feel suffering. I cry out to God, and a lot of times God, comes to my rescue, provides an answer. And this is a very, very, very common experience of people who believe in God. Fine. So, like, this is, we understand this works in our private lives, in our personal problems, or with regard to our personal problems. Um, but we don't, I don't think, sufficiently or properly um, do this for our global problems. We don't, I think what we may not do enough is take God to account, to basically say to God, what are you doing? This is, um, you created us, and to enjoy good things, to feel good when certain things happen, and to suffer when other things happen, to suffer when we see suffering. You created us, one of our greatest gifts is empathy. We feel other people's pain, we feel the pain of animals, so to create a species, and this isn't just the human beings, this is like, other animals, although it's a different situation, I guess with other animals, because I don't think they try to fix, global issues among their species, for example. But with human beings, we um we um we care. We were designed. God designed us to care, and God designed us to try to fix things. But you know, the answers have to come from God. Whether it's racism, whether it's economic inequality, global, poverty, climate change. We have to acknowledge that God didn't, at least at this point, create us to be intelligent enough or caring enough. A lot of times we'll talk the talk, but not walk the walk, especially politically, especially, in terms of countries. God created us with these limitations, so it seems um, it seems necessary to shift, or perhaps not completely shift strategies. God helps those who help themselves. We're not excused from doing what we can. But again, the way the world is going, the way the world has been going, it's seeming more and more evident to me that not relying on God, not taking God to task, not saying to God, listen, you need to stop hurting us. You need to stop, you know, endangering the future for our children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. Maybe that's what God needs to hear. Um, and that's what this series is about. It could be, and again, this is a theory. It could be that in order for God to listen to us, we have to be much closer to God, both individually and collectively, than we are now. One of the problems is that, my God, we don't understand God very well. Many of us, I was in a class recently where the class leader said, well, our belief is that God is not omnipotent and God is not omniscient. That is a profoundly mistaken understanding of God, profoundly. And to the extent that our religious leaders, have this mistaken understanding, you can imagine what that the ordinary person who hasn't delved into this, thinks or doesn't think. Um, so yeah, it may be that in order for God to listen to us, we need to get a lot closer to God. In order to get closer to God, we need to think about God. We need to talk about God now. We need to admit to God, and there, it's like the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me this, the what is it? The courage to change what I can change. The serenity to accept what I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. I mean, basically, this is about understanding that yes, there, our world, the way it is now, we have failed. We're failing miserably. Trump getting elected, his having 70 million people vote for him. That's like epic failure, you know? And so like, you know, maybe this is part of God's plan. I mean, if you were God, if was God, I'm not sure we would have done it this way. I mean, if I was God, I would have like just had everyone just like, feel pleasure all the time. I don't understand the need for pain for sentient beings. But maybe, maybe what God does, or what God is doing is presenting us with such challenges that we either have a choice. We've got a choice now. We can either like accept a slow spiral into more and more pain, more and more suffering, more and more devolution of our civilization, which is what's happening. It's happening, year by year, but especially decade by decade. By 2050, 2060, 2070, God help the people who are there. And maybe that's God's plan to make things so challenging for us, to show us our lack of intelligence with this, our lack of concern, our lack of morality, so that not out of our virtue, but out of our need, out of our self-interest, we will appeal to God. We'll ask God to help us. Um, and I guess maybe I'm presenting this to you because it could be that that it's kind of like one person understanding this a lot may not be enough. 1,000 people understanding this enough may not be enough. It may be like millions of people that need to understand that we need to appeal to God. And then, so it's so, so yeah, this may be part of what we need to do. We need to not just understand this, we need to spread this understanding. And maybe that's, the strategy that's across the board. In politics, a lot of times, it's like the holy grail is getting money out of politics. Today, in our world where people stormed the Capitol because they believed Trump's lies about the election being stolen, and because Facebook and Instagram and Twitter publicize these lies, just, basically lighting a fire under everyone. So like they actually believe they're doing good. What they're doing, they sincerely believe that they're stolen. So like, so basically, we we need to understand that that yes, there are some things we have to get money out of politics. We have to like stop this disinformation. These are the things we need to do as people. But to the extent that we're not doing it, what are we going to just throw up our hands and say, well, this is too difficult. So, we're going to have to just allow civilization to crumble over the next several decades. I mean, is that the answer? Because if that's not the answer, if we believe in God, if we have faith, if we understand, I mean, this show is not about believing in God. This show is about understanding that God is the only reality that exists. It's not like that you have to prove that God exists. God is the only thing you can prove exists. Everything else is a part of God. And so it may be that in order for us to pragmatically solve our problems, we have to rely on God. Not just talk the talk. We have to just like get closer to God. And so, yeah, I'm doing this for myself in that sense that, I believe that I can have more influence on God by understanding God better. And I believe that every episode that I do of this, hopefully I'm understanding God better. Because if I'm talking about God and thinking about God, you would think that gradually, slowly but surely, I'm coming to understand God better. And that would naturally apply to all of us. So, but, um, yesterday I mentioned that joke about the guy who had lost something, down the street, and he was looking at the street corner under this street lamp, and he's looking there because like the light is better there. So it's like if he's looking, you know, it's like a mistaken premise. In other words, like the mistaken premise is that that God is not in control of everything, that we are like these mini gods, that we have the power to affect things. And to the extent we make ourselves into gods, which is actually kind of like idolatrous, it's blasphemous, we're not going to like solve these problems. Or, perhaps, yeah, perhaps these problems are God's ways of drawing us to God. I mean, that works on an individual level. I mean, anytime, like people, there's that expression, there's no atheist in a foxhole. When we personally get afflicted, with illness, with economic loss, whatever, we turn to God. That's when we turn to. A lot of times when things are going really well, we forget about God, and that's unfortunate. We should complain to God about that. I mean, it shouldn't be that way. But again, it could be that all this, our climate change. I mean, like forget about everything else. Climate change. Climate change is God's calling us. God's having us understand. Listen, no, you're not going to solve this on your own without me, because you're not intelligent enough, because you don't care enough, and that's the reality. And so, like to the extent we understand, well, we're not intelligent enough, we don't care enough because God is not allowing us to understand and care enough. That might be the right path. That might be closer to the answer. All right. Well, I got worked up because yeah, somebody presented something on you know a major problem that affects me a lot. I care about people, and like, you know, an hour talk on like how horrible things were for some people. This is like, years ago, many years ago. And then I asked him, well, I presented, I said, like, well, what is the solution? He said, I don't have a solution. Well, come on, if you're going to like present a problem to us like that and make us feel angry and frustrated and sad and afraid, no, I think it's incumbent upon you to provide a solution also. At least, not just like, the solution this guy gave is like, oh, just talk to people. No, I'm sorry. Um, but again, and I don't think that even that is not what's not needed. I think we've reached the point where we need to appeal to God. I'm running out of time, 20 seconds. Catch this every Monday through Friday, 5 o'clock on White Plains Community Media, Channel 76. You get Optimum 45, you get Verizon, and the episodes are on YouTube. And all right, hopefully by tomorrow I'll have a bit more peace of mind and we can make more progress. Thanks for watching. Take care.